Welcome to the show. Welcome to what was this episode? I think this is episode 9.
Yeah. We're moving up there, and I hired my art director. He did a nice job, huh?
Yeah, it looks good. I like
Looks
what he did with
good.
that lamp right there.
Which lamp's that?
That one over there on
Oh, you
the.
can see.
You're right.
Does that screw things up? Should I turn that off?
No, it's fine.
Okay, I just realized that was on it, and I'm firing that art director. What the fuck?
Yeah.
I pay a guy $10,000 a day. I expect some
10 grand.
10 grand a day. Yeah.
Damn, you got a deal.
Oh,
Yeah.
your art director really did a nice job too. I really like it.
Yeah. They got these bamboo strips or whatever.
Yeah.
That was actually much further away than I realized.
Yeah, well, it looks good though.
Actually, I should change the lighting. I don't know. It looks a little grainy right now.
Well, see, our show's about things that matter, not not superficiality. So
Yeah.
I have to admit to everybody who's listening, I did not really hire a art director. This is all my own doing.
See, like the thing is like on the page, this looks much better. When you describe the sets and everything, it looks way crazier.
Well, yeah, when he drew the design and he drew the pictures for me, I thought, wow, that's perfect. That's me. That's
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, I should write up a little like like a page one, you know what I mean, intro or something to see like how I would describe this. How would you describe this on a page one?
Well, you look really rustic. In fact, I think next week I'm going to go to your place and shoot from yours, and you come here and shoot, because I think we got this backwards.
You got good lighting though. I think I should probably like I have like basically I use a shirt to create a nice soft glow. You know what I mean? Like all my years in film school, I just didn't get a softbox. I made one out of a dress shirt.
Oh, there you go. Well, I like that.
Getting
I
scrappy.
like to save things. I'm one of these people who saves things. I have an old chair that I used to use for desk chair, and I bought a new desk chair. And then I looked at the desk chair, I was going to throw it out, and I went, "What am I going to fix this desk chair?" So I fixed it.
I was just talking to Jen about this yesterday. She was saying that there's like a new market for old chairs. So like
Really?
if you just paint it up and then you can sell it. She was saying that the markup is pretty good. And of course she's into that stuff. I don't have any idea about what.
So if I sell the chair, maybe I could eat this week.
Yeah, there you go. You know what I mean?
That's the way to do it. Well, I've almost got it fixed now, but somebody asked me, I guess my wife asked me why I'm bothering to fix a chair since I'm probably going to give it away anyhow. And I said, I like fixing things. I don't know why. Isn't there something cool about something that's going to be thrown away and then you do something to it? Now it's functional again.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's also that like jigsaw puzzle mentality where it's like I like problem solving,
Yeah. And that's what I say about writing. The thing I love about writing is two things. One is that, because you were mentioning the puzzles, it's kind of like a puzzle all the time. It's always working your brain, trying to find a new way to do something you've already done or something that's not done yet. And it's all, all that. That's really cool. I really like that puzzle solving.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't even mind when they give me notes and stuff. Some people hate notes from the network or the studio or whatever. Usually, if it's a terrible note, I just go, I don't do it.
Yeah.
But I think I've said this before. Never tell them the notes are stupid.
Yeah.
Because I have had that happen a couple times to me in my career where somebody else told the network that they were stupid, and we were stupid because they canceled us both times. So wait a minute. Let's figure this out. The people who control your show, who supply the money, you tell them they're stupid and worthless.
Yeah.
Not a good idea. So I never say anything bad to people because you never know who's going to come back and bite you,
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to do their notes. If they give me a stupid note, I say, well, I'll give it some thought. And I do. I usually go back to the writer's room and I think, why the fuck did they give me that terrible note?
Or do you ever tell them like, oh, we implemented that note and you didn't change anything? And then they're like, wow, I really love it now. That.
I don't think I've ever gotten away with that, but I have done things where I've almost ignored it, but I made a little tiny change. and I said, yeah, that note helped.
Mm-hmm.
And then they don't want to not take credit for a note that helped, so they let it go.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
didn't. The thing is, and I've said this many times. Part of the fun of being a showrunner, and to some people it's agony, but for me it's kind of fun. Is that you have to, and maybe this sounds bad. Maybe I shouldn't say it. I'm gonna say
Nah,
it
go ahead.
anyhow.
It'll be
Okay,
all good.
I like manipulating people.
There we go. That's the
See,
stuff.
not bad, right?
No, 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 no.
So,
People
so
are basically puppets, and you like pulling their strings,
they're
and yeah,
puppets.
that's what
No,
makes us good writers.
if you tell them they're stupid, they shut up. They shut down. Boom, you're
Mm-hmm.
through with them. You can't get through. But if you tell them, what an idea. Well, let me think about that. They're still on your team. So what you
Yeah,
do is you do that to your own people too. Like when your art director comes with you something terrible, you never say, "Oh man, what's your problem?" You don't get
yeah.
it at all. I think I told you there's this funny story one time, and I don't think I'll mention the guy's name, but we were in a rewrite room, and everybody was pitching like crazy, and every idea that anybody pitched, this guy would say, "Oh, that sucks. Oh, that's stupid. Oh, what a
Oh, really?
fucking dumb idea." And finally, somebody
Wow.
said, "Ed, we're, we're oh, I said the name, didn't I? Ed, we're just pitching."
Yeah,
And he said, "So am I."
yeah.
And that was his answer. So am
That's his
I.
pitch. Yeah, wow.
His answer was his pitch is that's stupid. Oh, fuck that. Oh, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. Oh, what are you talking about? That was his pitching. So don't pitch like that. Nobody likes that.
Yeah.
Pitch ideas. Pitch your own ideas, and be good to people because that's what I said. It's kind of manipulative because it's a psychological game. If you can be direct with somebody who's an asshole and treat them like that,
Mm-hmm.
and then they continue like that. If you treat them kind of decently, they think you're their buddy, and then you can stab them in the back when they're not expecting.
That's the way to do it. You know what I mean? You want to catch them when they're off guard. Yeah.
Catch them off
Then go
guard.
for the
But
jugular. That's the way to do it. That's how you win in this world.
that's how you win. But the truth is, you don't get anywhere by alienating your own people or the people who control your purse strings. So
Right.
you gotta use psychology, and that's part of your job as a showrunner. If you want to be a showrunner, you have to be an amateur psychologist who figures out how to manipulate people, and
Mm-hmm.
you manipulate them for the good of the world, not for their good. So
Yeah. And what's good for me is definitely good for the rest of the world, I gotta say. I mean, I'm
well,
not trying to be a
of course.
narcissist or anything, but that's just my take on it.
Well, I have two thoughts usually about an idea. I think, what would Airto think? That's my
Mm-hmm.
first thought.
That's very good. That's a good start.
My second is, what would I think? What if
Yeah.
I were sober?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's kind of how you do it. So everybody who wants to be writers, now you know everything you need to know about writing. So you don't need to listen to anybody else's show or anything anymore. You're just manipulate everybody.
Yeah.
So make your way to the top by manipulation.
It is true though, like what you're saying about psychology. It is even if you don't want to be a showrunner, if you just want to be a great writer, you still have to understand a certain level of psychology because you put a character in a circumstance and they want something. You have to understand what they want, why they want it, and then from there you have to figure out what's the antithesis to that. So how to keep them from getting what they want and what makes that
Yeah.
interesting.
No, really, and you do learn a lot of writing. Actually, does help you learn about people a lot because
Mm-hmm.
you tend to listen more carefully. At least I started when I started writing full time. I started listening to people more and seeing how they react.
Mm-hmm.
And some things you say, well, nobody would say that, and then you hear somebody in an airport say that. You
Mm-hmm.
go, well, wait a minute, they do say things like that. Somebody once said, "There's a famous line." Somebody said, critic of a no, it wasn't a critic. It was one of the development people on a network said to somebody who wrote a show that had a Martian in it. Have you heard this line?
Mm-hmm.
The guy says a Martian would never say that,
Oh yeah, yeah. I think
and
I
you
think
go, and you want to say to the guy, "When was the last time you spoke to a Martian?" But you don't. You just kind of nod. When you get back to the room, everybody laughs at the guy behind his
yeah.
back. Oh, I'm telling you all this bad stuff. You shouldn't do that.
Well,
But
it's like Mr. Ed though. You remember that series, Mr. Ed?
yeah,
It's like, how did they know that this is what this horse was thinking? Like you have to kind of like take yourself out of your own perspective and think like, yeah, this is what the horse, I mean,
Absolutely.
I say that kind of jokingly, but in
No,
reality,
I know.
how do you feel so many seasons of a horse talking? You know what I mean? And that's just staying in the barn. It doesn't really, move very much. There's not a lot of, Wilbur goes around and he's a little bit more mobile, but they filled a lot
Yeah,
of They filled a lot of
it's
airtime
easier.
with that show.
It's easier to write for Wilbur than for
Hmm.
Mr. Ed, really. But Mr. Ed had that great deep voice, and
Hmm.
so he was funny because the in those days the mouth movements weren't quite so good. They
Yeah.
had the horse literally move in his mouth. They must have put something in his irritant or something in his
Yeah.
gums, and he'd actually move, and they'd put in the words they didn't fit really, but uh,
And that,
those were another time.
if I'm not mistaken, I think that was Edward James Olmos in one of his like, earlier
Yeah.
earlier before Darth Vader. Wait, is Edward James Olmos the one that does Darth Vader, or is that? Oh, did he just stand by me? Stand and
Yeah.
deliver.
Yeah, I don't know. They're all the same to me. All
Yeah.
these voiceover people, they got the greatest job in the world. You don't have to
Oh,
see them. Oh, what happened?
firecworks. Oh,
Oh,
fireworks.
fire.
It's Uncle Sam's birthday, so everybody's getting.
Oh
getting
yeah, yeah. We probably shouldn't be working on his birthday, but I have plans later in the evening. I'm going to go to a party and we're going to watch fireworks from the rooftop.
Oh yeah, I'm doing the same actually.
All right. Now we're doing it.
Mm.
All right. Happy 4th of July, everybody. These are my patriotic glasses, which when I bought them, they were red, white, and blue, and something happened. I don't know. Maybe oh, wrong glasses. All right. Never mind.
All right.
So we were talking about grammar, right?
Yeah. I think that was what we were getting to. Oh, actually, you know
Actually,
what? I did have a question about that. Do you ever? This is like we were talking about it a little bit earlier before we started about pet peeves and stuff like with grammar.
yeah.
Do you ever get a correction
I'm
from
writing something
some?
down. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Go
You
ahead.
ever get a correction from someone and they misspell in their notes or whatever? That like almost drives me crazy. You know what I mean? When somebody they
Yeah,
they correct my writing with improper grammar and improper spelling.
absolutely. I've had that. I've had somebody
I'm
tell
just
me
like,
I've had somebody say about a word I said. Somebody said that's not a word,
yeah,
and I'd go, it's kind of embarrassing. They said it on the set in front of everybody. They read the line the guy says in front of everybody. Well, that last line doesn't work because that's not a word. And I said, well, first of all, even if it weren't a word, the actor's saying it as a character, so the character could make that mistake. So shut up.
yeah, exactly.
But he was wrong. It turned out, well, I use the word in a way that's not ordinarily used very much, but anyhow, yes, that does happen to me. But
Let me ask you this: is
yeah,
conversate a word?
conversate?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think so, is it?
No, I don't know. My mom. I was talking to my mom last night, and I said something about, people I was like, if you conversate with someone, and she's like, I think it's
Oh,
converse, and I was like,
yeah,
I think you're right, actually,
yeah,
but
yeah. I think
I
she's
like
right.
conversate.
I like conversate; it has a nice sound to it. But
Yeah.
and the thing is, but also, if you seem to have a command of the English language, you're a good writer or you're a good showrunner. You can throw things like that in and fuck with people.
Mm-hmm.
They think you're right because they
Yeah.
think he wouldn't make a mistake like that. So
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
But
I didn't
I
know.
want to talk about grammar just for a minute.
Sure. Go ahead.
Um, I was an English major, and I'm kind of like finicky about grammar. I really like proper grammar, just because it kind of gives us a foundation. Like, to be creative, you got to have a foundation from which you expand.
Right.
You can't just throw things out from nowhere. Or, it's just kind of chaotic. So I think that writers who use the English language should understand the English language as well as they can, including the rules of grammar. Doesn't mean first of all, doesn't mean the dialogue should be grammatically correct, because people don't speak
Mm-hmm.
grammatically correct most of the time. So your grammar I don't want you to use correct grammar, obviously, all the time. I just think that's the base from which you should know. So you should know when your character is not speaking properly,
Mm-hmm.
because you really know how it should be said.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to master the English language or be an English major. It just means you can't say things like, the car don't run good, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Uh,
Unless it's for the character, unless the character does
unless the
naturally
character's
speak that
saying
way.
it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm saying I've seen those kinds of lines, and that was a bad line. I'm sorry. Take that out.
All right. Line read.
Okay, take that out. But I sometimes people will put things in the stage directions or the action lines that are grammatically incorrect and are so, kind of awkwardly incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, it reflects poorly on you as a writer. The person reading your script wants to think you have command of the language. And when you have characters who speak grammatically incorrect, that's your choice, not that's the only way you know how to speak.
Right.
So they want to think you have the versatility to write people with bad grammar, people with good grammar, people who speak somewhere in between. And I'm not advocating at all that you mess with the way people speak. You should write the way your characters would speak, however they would speak. But when you write your stage directions and your character descriptions and your action lines, those should be grammatically correct because your reader knows it's you. They don't think it's some character writing those lines. So you kind of reflect poorly on yourself. If they believe, and I said this before, if they believe you have command of the language because you're a writer, they have more respect for you. They do. And then you can get away with more shit. Like you can say, what was it when you used converse? No, conversation.
Yeah.
Conversate. You could get away with that. Nobody and everybody would just like think they don't get it, you know.
Yeah.
But it's true. The more command you have of the English language, the more people will kind of leave you alone when you deviate from correct language.
Right, because they know it's not something that's it's not an inability for you to articulate correctly. It's basically they can see the difference. And if you do have you ever gotten, overwriting is a big thing when it comes to writing a script, either too much description, too much dialogue, too much trying to cram too much into a story. But also I've gotten notes where, I think somebody said one time, like, well, it's obvious you have a dictionary or something like that. And I was thinking, like, I don't have a dictionary around. This is just the way I write. I actually don't. How do you feel about this? Like, I don't speak at all like I write. I can write much more eloquently than I can actually talk. It's a bit of a struggle to speak.
I think most people are like that. I think most people have a larger writing vocabulary than a speaking vocabulary.
Yeah.
And also not just vocabulary, but the use of language. I take more risk and I speak more eloquently as a character who speaks that way than I do myself.
And what about curse words and stuff like that? Because I know,
I
like,
love them.
and network television is not something that you use. Except now they're starting to kind of bleed that stuff in a little bit. Not all the time, but it's getting, like you said before, scumbag was a crazy word back in the day, and now that's probably something that no one would even think about anymore. But
yeah, I got censored for scumbag once because they told me that meant a used condom, and I didn't know that. Somebody called me a scumbag, and I got upset. Yeah. I know what that means. It means you're a jerk. Jerk is the very simple way to say it.
Yeah,
not as colorful as scumbag. And then so he said, a censor told me, no, you can't say scumbag. You can say dirtbag.
Yeah.
I said, well, all right. I guess I could get away with saying dirtbag in this situation, but he's really a scumbag, this guy.
It's interesting. It's like they're really concerned about what's in the bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know. And ever since that, after when he told me that, I went, who needs to know that?
Yeah.
So I wonder how many people actually knew that before I said it just now.
I'd never heard about it until we talked about it before. Yeah, and the thing about, go ahead.
No, go on. Go on.
I just think like, it's weird to censor because it does often speak about the person censoring more than the person that's using whatever word or what have you.
They used to give us a limit. You could say a word like you say bitch maybe once in a script. You couldn't say it more. Sometimes they approve a word but with limited usage, which I don't understand. And I think I told you one time I got censored on a script I wrote for a Taxi episode where the foreign guy, which was played by Andy Kaufman, which was Lotka. Our character's name was Lotka.
Right.
Which was just a ripoff of Andy's stand-up act where he was a foreign man, a foreign guy, foreign guy, he called himself. Anyhow, he came in, he did his thing where blah, 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 we don't know what he's saying, and he has his bag, and somebody said, well, Lotka, is that your lunch? And he said, no, it's goat droppings because he uses it for fertilizer. And it played off on a joke later, but we had to establish they had a bag of goat droppings. Now you probably know where the joke's going. It's not a pleasant place, but goat droppings in a lunch bag is a great setup for a joke somewhere.
Right.
Anyhow, the network said, no, you can't say goat droppings because they're gooey and disgusting, even though there's no bad word in them, there's no profanity. It's an ugly image. Really? And they said, but we're not asking you to eliminate the joke. He just has to say goat pellets. He has a bag of goat pellets because they're dry. And I'm going, who thinks of this stuff? Because they're drier and cleaner, that you can say goat pellets, but goat pellets probably don't stink the way goat droppings would. It was part of the joke. And the interesting thing is later on, I thought about it and said, I don't even want to do this joke anymore. It just sounds like a terrible toilet joke now. And so actually a good thing came out of a censor having a bad note. The censor's bad note was say goat pellets instead of goat droppings. And what I did instead is I cut the whole thing out. And I'm glad I went, geez, his note, the joke I was doing was probably as bad as the note. So let's just get rid of the whole thing. So we never did that bit, but so sometimes that's also a point. Sometimes you get bad notes and a good thing comes from a bad note. Sometimes that happens.
Were you shielded a lot from, because you have Latko, which I guess, you were saying was a takeoff from his foreign guy character that he had in stand-up. Did you get not notes from the network, but did anybody write in to complain? Like cancel culture now would probably be all over that,
Yeah, no, I don't think Andy wasn't really really well known when he started on Taxi. Taxi kind of got his fame going, though Andy did a lot of bizarre and kind of maybe ingenious things. He also did some really offensive things too that he liked to do, and he got all his attention from being on Taxi, and then he spun it off to do all sorts of things. But we did just rip off his foreign guy. I mean, he knew it. He was fine. They just said somebody. I think Jim Brooks saw him do foreign guy and thought it was funny, and said, "We want to do foreign guy on our show." And Andy said, "Okay." And then they said, "Okay, well, here's the deal. We do about." Said usually we do 22 to 25 episodes. Blah blah. And Andy stopped him right away and said, "No, I don't want to do that many episodes a year." And everybody else is fighting for episodes so they get more money. And Andy said, I want to do half as many as everybody else.
That's very interesting. I mean, yeah, because it's a very look at me culture, the acting culture. You don't usually see people vying to get less screen time,
I
less,
know. I think people said it was Andy didn't like television. And he was only doing it because he needed the money because he was making no money doing foreign guy. And
which is funny because he made a lot of money doing foreign guy.
Yeah. So when he did foreign guy for us, he made a lot of money, but half of what we wanted to pay him. So I got to tell you this. I mean, Andy's gone, and the foreign guy was not one of my favorite characters. So I don't mean to denigrate him in any way, but I didn't really like foreign guy very much or Lotka that much on the show. But he wanted to do about half the episodes, and I'm so glad he made that choice because it was hard to write for him because he was pretty silly. Foreign guy it was a pretty silly bit, and it made every episode that had a Lotka bit in it got a little silly. So I wanted less of foreign guy or Lotka. So it was kind of good that he did that. It was his choice.
It's smart too because if you follow his career after, he had to figure out a way to get away from that character, and so when he did the wrestling stuff, it was so extreme and so opposite of that character. But it's like he had to like find a way to be like, look, I'm not this character, I'm this person also. You get very pigeonholed, and it seemed like he was very aware of that kind of thing.
Did I ever mention on air where Andy once rented Carnegie Hall. Did I ever tell that story? I'll do it really quickly if I.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a little bit with the Great
Oh,
Gatsby
we
and
did. Oh,
everything.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He read the Great Gatsby in his own voice as Andy Kaufman
yeah,
until everybody finally left the theater. He read as much as he could until he got rid of everybody in the theater except for a handful of people who appreciated the insanity of it and stayed to let him read the whole Great Gatsby if he wanted to. And at some point, he did stop when he got to very few people. And also, I don't think he could have read the whole book in the time he had for the theater. And those people who remained, he took them all. He had a bus out back. He had a couple buses, and he took them all out for a dessert.
You know what's crazy though is because he's doing this character and they're yelling out to him in the audience. Because I went and watched it after we talked about it. I saw
Oh,
it
you
in
did? Oh,
yeah, and I saw it in the Jim Carrey's Man on the Moon, or what was the name of that movie?
yeah, yeah. That was it.
And then so they're yelling out for him to do latke and everything, and he's getting more and more frustrated, so he just keeps reading, and like
Yeah.
because he's trying to break that
Right,
you
right.
know but it's just very fascinating because comedy is usually based on a freshness, and if you tell the same joke again, it's the same audience. It's weird to do the greatest hits for comedy. That's a very bizarre thing. It's not like music where you can listen
That
to the
is
same
true.
song over
Yeah,
and over
yeah,
again.
yeah. Do that one. Yeah, do the joke where your punchline is so and so.
Yeah,
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
have you ever seen that documentary about the Aristocrats?
No.
Oh, so that's what you got to check that documentary out. It's basically the joke is, and I'm not gonna do the joke or anything, but it's a joke about aristocrats. So everybody does almost the same setup, and it's a joke that's shared among multiple comedians. So like
Ah.
sometimes when they're bombing or whatever, they'll pull out this joke.
Oh,
But
that's interesting.
it's fascinating because the setup is generally the same. It's the one rare joke where the joke is shared amongst comedians in front of an audience. and
Yeah.
and they do the similar setup, but then they always diverge in some super like disgusting manner, you know what I mean? Because it's
Uh-huh.
the idea is they're aristocrats, so they're supposed to be kind of hoity-toity, and then it devolves into some like base level thing. But
Oh.
it's very funny. And
You know
I
what I
think
found too? Yeah, go ahead.
I was
Go
just saying,
ahead.
I think Gilbert Gottfried did like he did a really great
Uh,
one. I think that was during a roast or something like that. It's very fascinating. So,
you know what? Sometimes when people ask me how to write comedy, and that's really something you can't really help somebody who doesn't have a sense of humor develop a sense of humor. Maybe over a long period of time you could, but um, the main element, the main device that works all the time is surprise. Most
mhm.
jokes are based on surprise. A punchline you don't anticipate, a punchline that's bigger than you anticipated. It's usually surprise. But recognition works too. And sometimes people laugh at recognition, which we
Mhm.
play very often in shows where we call it a callback, where you had a joke earlier that worked, and then a line just referring to it gets the audience to laugh because their recognition of we get what you just referred to because we
Mhm.
saw the joke and we're smart enough to keep that thought in our heads. So recognition works. So when you have a joke like that, that's an established joke that is passed around. As soon as somebody starts to tell it, you're no longer laughing at the joke. You're laughing at the fact that this person is telling is going to embrace that traditional weird thing, and you get it immediately. As soon as they start into you, you get where it's going. You even know where the punchline is, and it's the recognition can make people laugh, and then you can divert that with a surprise by not doing the punchline they anticipated. So
Right, right. It's almost like like when you have a good friend, a good buddy, and you have inside jokes. It takes
right.
less to sometimes make them laugh. It could be a glance or a reference to this, basically a callback, a little, whatever the joke may be. And that way, when you build those type of things with the audience, they're participating. They're starting to use that intellect that they have, and
Uh,
they're like more involved because they're anticipating it, but they're also like engaged in a way which much different, where you're just passively listening.
Yeah, no, it's if you get your audience engaged in any way, whether it's comedy or drama, then you're running the bases. You're running inside the park home run. You run fast and get all around those bases while they're with you because eyes can turn on you pretty quickly too. I did stand-up comedy too, and sometimes your old stuff will work because it's old stuff, and sometimes old stuff doesn't work, and you gotta make some quick changes. But when people are laughing, I'm saying you run those bases fast because you don't know how long that's going to last.
Right.
And I've done shows where the first show on stand-up, first show scores really big, usually it's the second show because people are drunker by then. People are laughing like crazy in the second show, but not on the first show. But last night you killed on the first show, so you open up with that for the early show, and nothing.
Yeah.
You're doing it exactly the same way, but the energy in the room's different. It's like sports where they say the fans are another player, like they always call baseball their fans are the 10th player, or each team they always count the fans as an element, like a player. And it's true, because if you're in a room where everybody's got energy and they're feeding, even if they're not responding, you don't want them throwing you lines and stuff.
Sure.
And
Yeah. Of course.
hecklers are terrible, but when
It's
they're
rhetorical.
laughing,
Yeah.
when they're laughing in anticipation and just have an energy, sometimes you just get in the room and you feel the energy. And some comics call it magic, and some writers call it magic because they can't really define what it is, because it's probably a very complex psychological process that varies from time to time, and we can't figure it out because there's too many parameters, there's too many possibilities for what it could be. And you just play it, you just go in there and you throw yourself to the wolves with the audience. And I love stand-up sometimes because, and I also love doing a 4-camera show, a multiple camera live action show, for that reason, because sometimes you go in there and the audience is just full of energy, and your stuff just works so well. But sometimes you walk in, the audience is dead, and they're not laughing or responding to the warm-up guy, which jokes you saw he warmed up the last audience and killed. And you just know you're in trouble right from the get-go. You're in trouble. You say, how can you get 250 people and they kind of think as one? 250 people who are all full of happy, laughable, energetic energy.
Right.
And then the 250 more people come in for the second show who have none of that. You go, how could you get that many people who are all thinking alike? They're all not liking it, they're all liking it. I think sometimes you can seed your audience too. I've seen that done with stand-up comics. They'll bring in their friends or they'll hire laughers, and that does work. People laugh at laughter. That's one of the reasons I like going to the theater, to movie theaters, because the laughter in the theater makes me feel good. The actual laughter. I don't like canned laughter. I don't like sound. I don't like laugh tracks. On Taxi and Cheers, we only used the real laughter from the audience. And there were times they didn't laugh at something and you wanted to push up the laughter because you knew you had the ability to do that in post-production.
Right.
We never did. The only time we ever cheated on a laugh was when it was one of my jokes and I was running the show. No.
Yeah.
The only time we ever did that was sometimes you'd run a scene and the cameras would screw up, or an actor would blow a line or something. There was some technical problem, so you had to do the very same scene right now again in front of the same audience. And they just heard all the lines and all the jokes, and then they don't respond really at the same level. Sometimes not at all. Then you put laugh in it. Otherwise, it looks weird. You're having laughter and everybody's laughing at this level on your show, and suddenly you have a scene that's just as funny and the laughter's down here. It wouldn't play well. So we do use the laugh. I met the guy, he has a laugh box computer thing. He put any kind of laugh on any level and any degree of ethnicity, race, type. I mean, he just has any combination. You come with the craziest combination of laughter, and he can put it all together for you in a very short time and play it for you on different levels. So it's easy to push up those laughs, which we did only when we had to reshoot scenes. And I really mean that. We never cheated on laughs.
Yeah, that's crazy. And the thing is, like, Okay, for jokes, right? Like if you see a person that constantly laughs at their own jokes, it's usually kind of annoying. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it kind of kills the jokes. But when I worked at this comedy club, there were certain comedians, one in particular that I remember, I don't remember what his name was, but he would laugh after every joke, but that was part of the joke. That was part of his
Uh-huh.
shtick, and so you'd end up
Yeah.
laughing with his laughter,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah.
if you're at a
You can use
party or
it that
something,
way.
yeah, yeah. And if you're at a party or something though, like and somebody's constantly laughing at their own joke, they think they're the funniest person in the room. It just kind of kills the mood. I don't know why that is. It's just bizarre. But yeah, laughter is
But
contagious. It's kind of like
real
John's or
laughter is
something.
great. Jim Brooks used to make us laugh because I mean, not make us laugh because he was funny. He would order us to laugh.
Yeah.
What he would do is say, look, the actors need the laughter. And you're going, no, they're human beings. They know they've rehearsed this thing in front of us 4 times. They don't expect us to laugh the fourth time. No, Jim always wants to laugh to keep the actors up. And I spoke to a few actors who said, yeah, we know you guys you're just laughing at your own jokes, so you don't have to rewrite them. See, so it worked against the very purpose he was doing. He
Mm-hmm.
wanted to give them some morale or some support for it. Instead, they were pissed that we were laughing to keep our own jokes in the script so we wouldn't have to rewrite them, which was not the intention of us, but some shows do that. I've been on shows, like you said, it's irritating when somebody laughs at their own jokes.
Yeah.
When a writing staff laughs at its own jokes, that's like not only annoying, it's maddening. It just
Mm-hmm.
makes it. I hate that, and they do that, and I have seen that where they laugh at their own jokes so they don't have to rewrite them,
Mm-hmm.
or because the network people are at this run through, so
Right.
they laugh. And so Jim used to say, "Ken, you don't laugh," and I don't. I laugh really quietly. I'm just not a big laugher.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd say, "You got to develop a laugh. You got to be able to laugh. That's part of your job as a showrunner."
Mm-hmm.
And I never was able to because I always felt it sounded fake. And Jim has this laugh that sounds fake to me that's in every major show he ever did. And he did some wonderful shows. And his laughter's in him as like his trademark. You can hear in every laughing moment, you hear that which is really Jim Brooks laughing, that fake laugh that he did to make people laugh.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it for his intentions were good. He really believed that, like we just said, laughter is contagious and laughter makes you feel good. He wanted to give support to the actors and maybe even to the writers to some extent by doing that laugh. It just didn't sound like a real laugh. And you know what? I may be wrong. It may have been a real laugh. I should take that back because maybe he just laughs in a goofy way as a real
Yeah.
laugh. I don't know if I've ever heard him doing a real laugh, but
Yeah.
whatever. You can watch the Mary Tyler Moore Show and you can hear You watch Taxi, you hear There are all these great shows he did that were wonderful shows. You hear that laughter as part of it, and I actually got to the point where I liked it because it identified the show for me that, oh, that's a Jim Brooks show, you
Yeah, that's
know?
interesting. Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
he used
that's
to
pretty
get
crazy.
mad at us for not laughing. He would sometimes would, and on other shows worse. Jim Brooks wasn't he didn't hit on that a lot. If he'd tell you to laugh, he didn't laugh. He kind of let it go. But I worked on shows where really they said you guys didn't laugh hard enough,
Mm-hmm.
and you go, crap, that's not my job as a writer.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't laugh hard enough. And then next scene would happen and you wouldn't laugh hard enough again. And they get mad at you. What does it take for us to how do we get through to you guys? You have to laugh at these jokes or they're not going to survive and everybody's going to the morale's going to be lower.
Which is
I
weird too,
hated those
because
shows.
you're by the time somebody else is reading it, and like you've heard it 1,000 times.
I
You've read over
know.
that line so many times. I've had, and I'm sure you've probably had this too. It's like you write a line that's funny, you read it a bunch of times, and after a while you forget about that. You work on some other joke, and then, somebody laughs at something. They laugh at that joke, that earlier joke, and you're like, oh, I forgot that was even a joke. Like I'm glad
Oh
you got
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's
yeah.
great. Yeah,
No, that does happen. You forget something's a joke, or
yeah.
sometimes you just you think it doesn't work anymore because
Mhm.
you've read it so many times. You're going, that's not really funny. That's just rude.
Mhm.
Because there's a fine line between being rude and funny, and between being morbid and funny, and
Mhm.
between being sad and funny. There's a fine line between pain and laughter. There's a very
It's
fine
interesting
line.
too. Now you bring that up. comedy has a lot to do with meanness, and I know that the woke culture right now is really anti anything mean, which is just
Yeah.
ironic because how totalitarian they are. But at any rate, there's the knee-jerk reaction, especially now in stand-up comedy, the newer comedians, is to do punch-up jokes, not to do punch-down jokes, meaning like you're being mean or degrading or take my wife, please, that kind of thing. Like now it would probably be like, you know, please let me keep my wife, or I don't know what the fuck it would be, but
No, I know. It
you
is
know,
harder. A lot of jokes are put downs because
mm-hmm,
laughter is based to a large extent on laughing at pain.
mm-hmm,
And laughing at pain gives us some relief. So a lot of jokes are based on mean things or
mm-hmm.
bad things because we're laughing at them. We're going to badness. Death, laughing at death is going, death, I'm not afraid of you.
But
You
there's
know?
also a superiority thing, right? So like if
Yeah.
when men talk about women, they're having a good laugh about it, and the woman would be offended by it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, the superiority issue.
Those
So
kind of jokes. Yeah. You got to be
yeah,
careful about that kind of stuff. There,
yeah.
there, there are jokes based on superiority that are mean spirited that are not meant to laugh at the pain, but kind of inflict pain. It's just
But if you do the inverse, where it's like you're in a inferior position and you're making fun of like the rich people or the king or whatever, then it's like there's safety in that. But it's still mean, you know what I mean? It's very like it's a little bit of hypocritical in a way.
yeah, it is true. It's always okay to take shots at people who have it really made. People who are
Yeah.
really in a good position. What you don't want to do in any comedy is make fun of somebody who say is stupid and genuinely stupid, and
Hmm.
because they're stupid, they're suffering for it.
Yeah.
That's not funny. That's sad. That's drama. That could be
Yeah.
drama, but that's not comedy. Comedy is when you have a character like one of my characters, like Elegant Iggy. Jim Ignatowski was in my favorite episodes that I wrote was Elegant Iggy.
Mm-hmm.
But Jim Ignatowski burned his brain out on drugs. And in a way you'd say, well, he kind of did that to himself, so it's not as sad. But
Hmm.
more importantly, he had a great outlook on life. He was the happiest guy in the show. He
Hmm.
just didn't let things bother him. He was the most generous, loving, good. He was the best human being in the show.
Hmm.
And so when he says something stupid, you laughed at it because he wasn't he he was in a good space in spite
Hmm.
of his stupidity. If somebody's stupid and down and sad, and miserable for it, don't touch him. Not as
Hmm.
comedy. Not as comedy. So yeah, it's easier to make fun of rich people. It's easier to make fun of good-looking people.
Hmm.
Um, I don't like fat jokes. I
Hmm.
never liked them. I never will. I don't want to
Hmm.
laugh at somebody's disabilities.
Hmm.
I consider that kind of a disability of some sort.
Hmm.
When people are fat usually don't want to be fat, and
Hmm.
that's so you don't want to laugh at them for it. So I
This
don't
is
do
weird
those kind of
because like
jokes.
Chris Farley, like, we talked about this a little bit before, but Chris Farley's almost his entire catalog, like if you go back and look at it, is, self-effacing fat jokes. And when he's
That's
doing it,
okay.
it's funny, but now it's like kind of sad actually. And he's always been one of my favorites, but
Uh
like
huh.
it makes me a little bit sad, like
Yeah.
I feel like maybe
You
he was trapped by it.
you know what the thing is? He created a persona where it didn't bother him. He thought
Hmm.
making fun of it was like I said, thumbing your nose at
Right, yeah.
something.
Taking control back, yeah.
But we don't know. As a real person, he may have had a lot of pain over
Right.
his being overweight, and maybe his way of relieving that pain was to laugh at it with an audience. But maybe he had a lot of pain, and so you can't. If you start analyzing your comedy that much, you won't laugh at anything. So
Right.
you can't really do that. But most comedy is based on pain.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, Kevin Hart's like one of his specials is "Laugh at My Pain." That was
Oh
the name of
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
special. Yeah. So
Yeah. And one of the
yeah,
things people love about Kevin Hart is that he's very short,
yeah,
and he makes fun of that.
right.
And he's been so incredibly successful. Everybody wants to be him. So
Yeah,
how bad can it be to be short when everybody
right,
wants to be who you are?
right.
It's like so. Yeah, it's a very mixed bag. But I've always said it's a very confusing moment, and I've seen it done on shows where somebody's walking that line between pain and laughter, or pain and humor,
Mm-hmm.
and crosses over the wrong way and don't realize. I've seen people do something that was supposed to be painful, they'll be laughed at because it was just too big.
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody, I remember Jim once wrote a line that turned out to be a great line that he wrote for a laugh, a line that Reverend Jim said, that on stage people moaned, but not a bad moan. They moaned like, oh my, they moaned
Mm-hmm.
at his pain, that they
Mm-hmm.
felt Jim's pain. And everybody thought the line was written to express that problem that Jim was feeling when he very seldom feels any problem. He
Mm-hmm.
felt some remorse, and the audience couldn't laugh at it. Instead, they not groaned. What's the word? They made an audible sound of sadness for him, but
Mm-hmm.
for him and with him, and it worked wonderfully.
Mm-hmm.
But it was intended to be a joke, and it ended up being a very tragic line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
I
very
remember what the
fascinating. I mean,
line was.
again, that's like that part of the psychology. Like a stand-up comedians often do this too. Like usually they step on stage. I'm sure you've seen this a million times, and they point out the obvious thing. Like if they're a heavy set person, so I've been working out, like that kind of thing or whatever,
Yeah.
and it brings attention to it, and it's somehow like, if you approach the elephant in the room, and I didn't mean that because I said the heavy set thing earlier, but just the
The
elephant in the room.
obvious element, yeah. The
Yeah,
obvious, yeah.
then it's like it kind of like there's something that's kind of that self-effacingness of it, uh, makes you more approachable, a little bit more commonality, and if you're always trying to ignore that thing, then that might be something that's difficult to
Yeah,
get behind.
yeah. And you gotta be careful when you walk into the room and you say the obvious and you meant to joke, you may just destroy any moment you're going to have after that if the audience or the people in the room found it as offensive as could be. I had a colleague walk in the room and said, and everybody stopped talking because the colleague was the person in charge, and everybody stopped talking because they were, uh, I guess they felt a little intimidated by the
Hmm.
power of the person
Right.
entering. And
Right.
then the person who entered is an unattractive person and said, "Oh, everybody stops having a good time when the ugly person enters the room." And
Yeah,
everybody
that's a
just went,
different thing though, because
"Yeah, I
that's
know."
like,
Everyone, "Oh,
yeah.
oh, that's
Yeah,
terrible.
because
Why'd
they're
you
like,
say
that's
that?"
true, and usually they say it's funny if it's true, but in that case, you're just like, you're put off, it's off guard, But if they said, oh yeah, the model walks into the room and everybody gets, it's stargazed and can't talk, then that would be funny,
Yeah.
because it's like, oh, obviously they're not a model, you know what I mean? So that would be, it's like they're recognizing their flaws, and by recognizing their flaws, it puts people at ease.
If you recognize your flaws and put people at ease, you have to be clever about it.
Right.
That was
Yeah.
not clever.
Yeah.
Um, and
That
that's
puts
why,
people on guard, because you're
yeah,
like, damn,
yeah,
now this person's
yeah,
got a complex about how they look. Like, fuck, now I
yeah,
can't say
yeah, and
anything.
I can't. But I've seen people make fun of their own looks, say,
Sure.
about being ugly or being having a big nose or
Mm-hmm.
whatever seems to stand out in their personalities, and get big laughs. And that's where I say you can't teach somebody a sense of humor. I've said this many times. You can grow talent, you can nurture talent, you can hone talent, you can do all these things to talent. You can't make talent.
Mm-hmm.
And if your talent is having a sense of humor that is right on, spot on, you just know the difference between the funny part of the line and the
The
sad part of the
mean
line,
part or
and you
something.
just
Yeah.
know how to, you just know, you can just sense it, you just feel it. That's the talent. You can't teach that. What you can do is when somebody's doing that and they don't realize how good they are at it, you kind of help them see what they're doing right or wrong and whatever. But then you don't want to mess too much with it because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to mess with their feel for it, and make it all arbitrary and not arbitrary, make it
Robotic
all
or something. Yeah.
yeah, robotic, dogmatic, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to give them rules. So when I say I think people should learn grammar, they should learn grammar so they can violate the rules, not so
Mm-hmm.
they have to do grammar. And same thing with the rules of comedy. There are certain rules, like there's the rule of three. Three things, two things don't create a series, but three do. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want to establish a series of things, you don't say one, you don't say two, you say three. Three tends to be enough of anything you're doing. But the main rule of three is this joke where you say something in a certain tone, a certain way. You say something in the same tone and way, and when people now expect the third thing you're going to say is the same, you say something completely opposite or out of left field or wrong, and that surprise usually gets a laugh, and that's the rule of three. But and if you said something, okay, you're on my final. What is the rule of three? What is the rule of three? I don't like the way you define the rule of three. You're out.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's kind of cool to know the rules and know the basis, but nobody really actually thinks of jokes based on dogma or exact theory. You know, it helps you somehow to think about them and get your juices and your cogs and everything moving well together. But you can't really write.
It's a nuance to it. Yeah, because you can
Otherwise
recognize it. Yeah.
You know what they haven't done yet, and when they can do it, it's going to be horrible for us all, is when they really figure out how to computerize humor, which they can't do yet. There's some, they're not writing scripts. They've tried, but they're not really writing scripts, not comedy scripts anyhow, with computers. So they really can't figure it out, because one joke that's mean makes people laugh because of the way it was said and the timing or the inflection or the person saying it, and say the same joke to somebody else in a different situation, and you'll get things thrown at you in anger. So they don't know how to do that yet with computers. I don't know if they ever will. I'm hoping they won't. They're starting to generate actors. You know, they're actually, some of this animation almost looks like real people.
Yeah, I've got MetaHumans is this thing I use on my 3D software, and it, like, if you take a glance at it, you can kind of tell it's not a person. But I mean, if you hit the right lighting on it, and you know, you might think, oh, this is a person, you know, like a real person.
And so I fear that they're getting so close to that. If they start replacing actors with computers, then the actors won't be making the choice anymore. They'll hire people who are technicians to make the acting choices. What's that going to do to art? I mean, painting could be that way. At some point, figure out some abstract painting that's just a bunch of colors thrown on a canvas looks beautiful sometimes. Other times it's just like paint thrown on a canvas.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, as humans, we gravitate towards imperfection. We like the idea of perfection, but it's not really attainable. But you know, there, even in, like, you know, so like with 3D graphics and everything, the stuff that a lot of, like, really fine-tuned 3D artists like is the imperfections and things. They like that you put on smudges on the window, or because otherwise everything looks too not medicinal. What's that word where it's like you know, where you go to the hospital and everything's like really clean or whatever? Sterile. Too sterile.
Yeah.
You know, I was gonna say something too about the you know, the audience laughter, but also being self-effacing. There's a difference between being self-effacing and fishing for compliments. You know, one is more of a narcissistic personality type, and the other one is, you know, recognizing your flaws. So like Jon Stewart's really good at being self-effacing, you know, like, but that's because he probably is the smartest person in the room a lot of the time. You know, he's a very good writer. He's managed to keep the Daily Show going day in, day out, 5 days a week for, you know, I don't know how many years. He's a really intelligent person. So when he makes these jokes about, you know, however he chooses to be self-effacing, it's not as off-putting as somebody who is just fishing for a compliment. You know,
you know, like I hate when, like a pretty woman who says, "Oh, I'm so ugly today."
Yeah, that's exactly like kind of the idea I was thinking, is like, you know, that's an eye roller, because you're like, obviously, you know, you're good looking. It's kind of, you know, it's presumptuous to just assume that we all think you're good looking. Now, if somebody's like, yeah, I know, man, I hope that you can figure this out, you know, then it becomes a little bit funny, but you're laughing at that expense. You know, like I was
But they might actually think that they are making a joke when a pretty woman enters the room and says, "Well, the ugliest person just entered the room," because then that's just not a funny joke.
Yeah.
But they probably thought they were making a joke. Or you said, like you said, or they were fishing for a compliment. "Oh, you're so beautiful. I wish I, you know," it's like, who knows? Comedy is, that's why it's still, everybody listening, because you're alive, are still young enough to write comedy while it's not being done by computers. So
Hmm.
get out there and
Or
write it.
outlawed.
Because
It's not been banned yet. Comedy's not been completely banned yet.
yeah, well, it is. It hurts this whole movement about um, not offending people is hurting comedy because it's as I said, it's a fine line. If somebody makes a mistake and steps over the wrong way, you got to forgive them because you got to know their intention.
Also, you're
I
taking yourself
actually,
too seriously. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah,
if you can't laugh at yourself, then that's a problem. That is, if somebody says something about me and it's sort of true, you know what I mean? It's their take on who I am as a person. Sometimes that shit makes me laugh a lot. You know what I mean? It's like I don't
yeah,
try to take myself too seriously. And it's like, yeah, I do that. That's kind of funny. I don't do it exactly like that, but yeah, that's
yeah,
funny.
yeah. By the way, that's an ugly hat, man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know what I mean? So, it's a way of, if you, I think that's actually part of the cancel culture too, is everybody, it's a knee-jerk reaction to feeling inferior. I get that. But it's also like you're taking yourself too seriously, and that is creating another complex that's not healthy either, and that's, a little bit too much. And
I
usually the
did.
thing that is the cancel culture is usually speaking on someone else's behalf. It's not usually their behalf. They're getting offended on someone
Well,
else's
maybe,
behalf,
yeah.
and that's a superiority complex. That's not healthy. Like if you're
Mm,
like, you can't talk about these people that way, it's like they're gonna get so offended, blah blah blah. It's like you got offended on their behalf. They might not have a problem with it. You're just superseding their feelings because you
yeah,
want to feel superior and heroic. That's kind of gross, I think.
yeah. Huh. I did a series in China. I mean, I did a pilot for a series in China, and and it was a comedy. And when I met the Chinese, I thought they weren't funny people. My impression of Chinese people is they're not funny, which is a stereotype that's unfair on my part. I didn't think they were inferior because of that. I just didn't think of them as funny people.
Hmm.
But when I got to China and I started meeting these people, they were funny and they laughed at jokes and they made jokes. And
Hmm.
I went, wow, we all should travel the world more because you get these stereotypes based on television shows and movies or
Hmm.
what other people say, and they're not true. The Chinese people were funny.
Hmm.
Everybody I met on that project had a sense of humor and was a funny person and enjoyed laughter at their expense or whatever. It was
Hmm.
just like, any place.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it's the same.
but here's the weird thing about it. The government had no sense of humor. So the
Right.
government told us what we could do with the show,
It's
which
taking
was
itself too
basically,
seriously.
yeah. So
Yeah.
they said we had an old woman, an old Chinese woman in this Chinese family where an American comes to live with the Chinese family. Um, and she was always taking shots at this young American boy who was really good looking, who was very young, who was American, came from a well-to-do family, and was living with this Chinese family that was living on the wages that weren't so great, but in a communist countries where things are taken care of, so they don't have to have a lot. And so she'd take shots at him for being. She'd always put him down. Her shots were always, and they said, so they came to us and said, you have to cut all that stuff out with the old woman.
Hmm.
And we said, we didn't understand. We thought that was the funniest part of the show. They said it is funny, but we do not want to represent our elderly Chinese population as being snarky or whatever word they used, mean spirited or angry or some word like that. And we said, well, then she's not going to be funny. She's just going to be an old woman who's just going to say, like, I got to go to the potty, or whatever.
Hmm.
They wouldn't let us do it. So we took out all the old woman stuff except lines that were just pretty much setups for other people. And then they did similar things for almost every character. And when the whole thing was done, there wasn't one funny thing in it.
Hmm.
And I was embarrassed by it. I just, oh, this is the worst comedy I've ever seen. It's not
Hmm.
really a comedy, but it's not a drama either because we're doing setups with no punchlines.
Hmm.
It's like,
Was this in front
oh,
of a live audience?
no, no, no. We shot this a single camera.
Same account.
So eventually the I guess it's called the Ministry of Culture. I think is one, the Culture Ministry. No, there's a word for it. I've forgotten who they were, who were overseeing to some extent what could or couldn't be done.
Hmm.
And
Sounds very Orwellian. The Ministry of Laughter.
yeah, Well, there is a Ministry of Culture, and I think that they oversee all entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever it was, the middleman was actually the production company that was doing this, because they do some capitalistic stuff, even though it's a communist
Mm-hmm.
country. And this project was actually a capitalistic investment, a
Mm-hmm.
venture from people who had money, but they had to listen to the dogmatic.
Yeah, because it's
Uh,
ultimately communist, so they always have the final
yeah.
say. Yeah.
So when it was all done, they came to us and said, You're not very funny to me, and this is not a very good show. This is a bad show. And we're really upset with you
Mm-hmm.
making us spend our money on something that's so bad." And I, I just was like, I was so pissed off at that. I just said, you guys come in. You didn't tell me you're going to tie my hands. You didn't tell me when I came in here to do your comedy that no wonder Chinese people don't seem to be funny maybe to the rest of the world, because you don't let us see the real you, who are funny people who like, because these people didn't say the comedy wasn't good. They said the final version wasn't any good.
Mm-hmm.
And I said it was interference from your censors. And they agreed, but said, well, what are we going to do with this now? We spent all this money. Like, I was going to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What are you going to do with this thing?
Yeah.
Well, you sell it in America. No, this thing has no chance in America. It has no chance anywhere. And they really got mad at me. I thought they weren't going to let me out of the country. They were really mad. They
Yeah.
said, well, this is not what we wanted. And I said, it's not what I wanted. It's like, this is a terrible arrangement. The two countries aren't ready to do a joint project yet. So
Yeah.
I'm going to catch a plane, if you let me, and go home and never come back. And when we got to the US, we did try to sell it to some Chinese stations.
Mm-hmm.
And they all hated it too. They all said, well, there's nothing here.
Mm-hmm.
Now you go drama and you get away with that. But if you're giving us a comedy, and then I found out what they do, which I didn't know going in, because nobody told me this in anticipation. Nobody did this research. The Chinese do a lot of physical comedy
Yeah, I was
because,
just gonna say that in kung fu movies and stuff like that, there's tons of like they're always like laughing at somebody like spilling tea or you know what I mean,
yeah, yeah.
fumbling
So
about.
so
Yeah.
that's what they said. They make up for the lack of being able to laugh at themselves because of their government, not the
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't really laugh at themselves, and they want to portray the Chinese people as being very smart and stable and regular. The only time they can be funny is when they do clownish things, because
Mm-hmm.
then everybody knows it's just an act of clowns in a circus. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so they go for big shtick.
Mm-hmm.
Shtick works like
Physical comedy
old
though
Jerry Lewis.
is
Yeah,
very universal. Like I think
yeah.
that's why like Charlie Chaplin has like such a long or Buster Keaton, you know what I mean, has such a
Even Jerry
long.
Lewis is still
Yeah.
popular in Europe and I think maybe in China. I don't know, but
Yeah.
physical, sticky, big, funny faces and all those things, make
Yeah.
muggy, winky.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't write that kind of comedy. I had done Taxi and Cheers and things that were
Those are
more,
American sensibility comedies, though. You have to
yeah.
understand the nuance. Like, what makes Frasier interesting and funny is, our idea of what an intelligent person represents in our culture. You know what I mean? And like somebody who can
We
analyze
did
people but
laugh
still
at him.
has
Yeah, yeah.
problems.
We laughed at him for being too smart. See,
Yeah,
there's a case you were talking about, like the aristocrats. We can laugh at aristocrats. We can also
exactly.
laugh at people who are so smart that they're obnoxious. And there are people like that.
But he also
You're
has
one. You're one
problems.
for.
Yeah. He also has all
um,
these problems, and because he's so smart, you think like, I mean, we have an idea in our, maybe not everybody collectively has this idea, but there is, I don't mean to generalize everybody's thinking, like a consensus bias, but you know, if somebody's super wealthy or like you said, people who have it made, intelligence, good looking, well to do, those are harder. You have to find those you have to nitpick at what's their flaws because it seems like they have none, so that's what makes them funny, or at least grounds them a little bit, brings them down to earth. And I think that part of it gives us a little bit of sense of like, oh, they're actually kind of like us,
yeah.
and they're not
You know what
so.
else? We like to laugh at people who are flawed because they're also then more like us. So
Yeah.
somebody like a really good looking actress or actor has real trouble doing stand-up comedy because
Yeah.
people are already uncomfortable with that person. That person is not one of us, you know. Don't put somebody up there who's one of us talking about people like her or him. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're more comfortable with that. So it's so tricky. I've been doing this all my life, and I still don't. I mean, I can tell you these definitions and all this stuff, but I really can't tell you how to write or develop a sense of humor. And
It makes
so
me think of Christopher Reeve in Superman, like, because he's
what?
a handsome guy, but when he has the glasses on, he's nervous around Lois Lane, he's bumbling
Yeah.
about, people kind of, oh, okay, like,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Then they're with him more. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. So I say I teach. I'm not teaching now, but I've taught for a long time, and I never try to teach somebody to be funny.
Hmm.
I show them good examples of funny scripts and funny video and episodes and whatever. And if you can watch it and get it, and then copy, even mimic, uh, that's how you learn to a sense of humor. I can't. As I said, I can tell you the rules about surprise is the number one source of a joke, but sometimes surprising somebody just scares the shit out of them. It doesn't make them laugh. You know.
Another thing that you brought up, mimicry is actually one of those kind of untapped skills or untapped portions of comedy. You can mimic somebody in a bad way, like if the king said something and then he turns his back and you're like, like
Yeah.
that's kind of like a commedia dell'arte type of comedy. But
Yeah.
you have what's that guy's name that's from SNL that does like Al Pacino? He does so many voices. There's a lot of comedians that like Rich
Uh,
Little, who did a lot of mimicry, but there's a guy who's like really
right
good.
now,
Yeah,
a young person.
yeah, yeah, and he does like, and there are his characterizations of someone, but they're funny because it's like, you're not expecting it, and
Yeah.
their tone of voice is really great, but yeah, there's man, I'm horrible with names, but there's Jay Farrow, who I think that's his name, Jay Farrow from SNL. He would do like Jay-Z and all the like
Oh.
sometimes Bill Cosby. But like a good example that maybe some people can is when Eddie Murphy did Bill Cosby in Raw, and like told his story, but he only did a few little characterizations of Bill Cosby, and then it was like that was it would get huge laughs, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
and there's what's his name? I think it's I want to say I can't probably think of the name. I'll have to think of it later. But he's from SNL too, and he does a ton of really great characterizations. And then there's also Kevin Pollak, who he does a lot of he always does Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken's like one of those people that people mimic, and
Yeah.
that get
Yeah.
can get a laugh. And
You know who used to be great at he's older now, but Jim Carrey used to
Jim
do great
Carrey, yeah,
because he used to do. I don't know how he did this. He actually could change his face to
right,
almost look like them. I don't know.
yeah,
He'd do something, he'd push something, he'd pull some muscles, and
hmm,
he'd turn around again. You go, wow.
yeah,
You know, he almost looks like the guy. And the other interesting thing about Jim Carrey wasn't very funny as a stand-up. He did stand up, but people were so impressed by his impressions they didn't even care if the jokes
hmm,
weren't real strong. You know,
right.
so that's a case where why did the jokes wouldn't even work that well, but people still admired his talent.
Yeah, like he
Sometimes,
did Andy
yeah,
Kaufman, which is a difficult person to pull off, you know what I mean? But he did it with such,
yeah,
distinct attention to detail. Or, like take Dana Carvey's impersonation of senior George Bush, HW, and
yeah,
then you have Will Ferrell's, impersonation of, W, and
yeah,
how different those characters are. And Will Ferrell doesn't even really try to do George W. You know what I mean? Like he's not doing
yeah,
it so it's like he's doing the pomposity of him, it's a different type of impersonation. It's like he's kind
yeah,
of getting away with these his because before Trump got into office, right? Like everybody used to look at George W. as the one that just said the most random, crazy shit. You know what I mean? You'd
yeah,
be like,
yeah.
I think people forget that like we had a president before Obama that was also not that articulate, and but he said some crazy shit,
He
like
did say bad stuff, and he made a lot of mistakes, but everybody felt they wanted to have a beer with him, you know.
I don't know.
You
I
know,
was not a
because
big George W.
uh,
fan. Me personally,
uh,
no. But
well,
yeah,
but that's what I hear. People who work with him in politics said you always though could hang out with the guy,
he's
even
kind of
though
a
you
good
didn't
old
like
guy.
his,
Good
yeah,
old
even
boy
though you
kind
didn't
of.
like his politics.
Yeah.
So who knows? You know,
But I
it's
remember,
like,
like he said that one line where he's like, "You fooled me once, shame on me. Fool me twice,
yeah,
you can't
shame
get
on you.
fooled again."
Yeah, yeah,
You're
no,
like,
you
"What
got
the
that
fuck?"
wrong.
Yeah,
Yes,
that kind of shit.
but he must have been smart because I mean, he did some really smart things. So he maybe just wasn't well spoken. You know, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and people gaff. You know what I mean? It's totally normal to not always be like super on point, especially when you're doing all these different events over and over. You're in front of the camera. I mean, somebody's gonna catch you say something off. Off color,
Mm.
off topic, off. The particular phrase
Yeah,
that
you know, when
everyone's
you're
used to.
constantly everything you say and do is caught, which is why I never understood why people want to go onto Facebook or
Yeah,
even Twitter or anything where they're revealing everything about themselves.
yeah, it's a bit
It's like
weird.
if you do reveal too much about yourself, you're going to reveal some things that make you look like a
Hmm.
dipshit, you know, like an idiot, like a fool, like a bigot or whatever. You know, none of us are perfect. I don't want to be. You talked me into doing this show because I was concerned about being overexposed to the point that I might say some things that later on I'll regret.
Yeah,
You can't talk so much and not say some things that you want to take back. It just
yeah.
happens.
Yeah, and the today's just like expectation is everybody talks about everything. They spill their guts onto the screen and then they cry a bunch. It's a very different, like the old idea of Hollywood. You didn't know anything about these people. You saw them on the
Yeah,
screen, and
yeah,
then some stuff would come out in the press, but a lot of times that was publicist. I think a lot of people don't realize that like the power of publicist and public, like that it's sort of a propaganda where you talk about people being sick or saving a cat from a tree, like some of this is not even true a lot of the times. It's just a
yeah.
way to keep them in the public eye while they're in between pictures or something, and I think people forget that
I
that's
think that
also
that's
part
true
of
though
the
about
the
people go on
mechanism.
these dating sites and stuff. Everybody's lying.
Yeah,
You only like so far, but you know you can't like too far. Everybody lies about a little bit about their age and about their
yeah.
experience, and they want to seem funny or nice, or whatever. And they're short videos, so
Hmm.
you get away with it. You coached, and
It's so
I don't know. I don't
awkward.
want the exposure. This is the most exposure I've ever had.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to be behind the camera, not in front of it. So.
Yeah, I mean, same actually. It's like kind of unusual because I do prefer um yeah, being kind of not in the shadows like a lurker, but just not really being seen. It's like that's why I like writing.
Yeah.
Like you said, because it's like we live in a you weren't saying this, but you don't want to say something that like somebody misconstrues and runs off the cliff with it. You just want to the thing about writing is it's controlled. And one of the things I liked about writing is people actually have to when they're reading you, they have to actually listen to you. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh. And
so
then you know one thing that I like about writing is you can edit yourself and fix things. You know, if
yeah,
you make
yeah,
a
before you
mistake, you
show it
can
to
go
people.
yeah, you can go back
Yeah.
and fix it or uh think it through, put it aside and then look at it again and you can kind of do that with I found when I've tried to I usually do stand up, but we did stand up in kind of a spontaneous way. When I'm doing a scene, which I've done a few, I always feel unnatural when I'm doing other people's lines.
Mhm.
And I'm always thinking, this isn't playing real. This isn't real. This isn't,
Mhm.
and I don't feel, and I can't seem to get laughs when I try too hard.
Yeah.
I used to get a lot of laughs on stage when my material was spontaneous or at least seemed spontaneous
Mhm.
because it felt comfortable for me and I was able to play to my strengths. So we all can't do everything. I wasn't born to be an actor. I was
Mhm.
born to be a storyteller,
Mhm.
and I do that best. Um, and I really enjoy watching other people do my material, except when they screw it up, when they do it the way I know it was not intended to be done, and that killed the joke. That's frustrating. But
Mhm.
on the other hand, I don't want to be up there doing it week after week. the same lines over and over again, trying to get laughs from it when it's gotten old.
Yeah, and it's hard to. I feel like I was much better when I would do improv. Like again, off the cuff, like
Yeah.
being in the moment. Like I feel like that's why I can do certain things really well, but having to repeat the same line, that was one of the things. Even though I love stand up, I like writing jokes, I like all that kind of stuff. It's hard for me to imagine myself in front of different groups saying the same thing over and over again.
It is. Stand-up comedy is very hard. People don't give these stand-ups all the credit they deserve because they do the same jokes over and over and over again. Usually it always seems spontaneous or it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And they're actors. They're playing those moments and they're playing them really well.
Mm-hmm.
I had trouble with that. When I had to do the same line over and over and over again, I lost that spontaneity that actors are able to continue. So I'm not a trained actor. Maybe I could do it if I had some training, but
And you're
I
very
don't really want to.
exposed. You're just out there and it's a microphone. Projecting your voice is very unnerving, and like hearing it loud with speakers around and people just staring at you. Because there's, like I was at the theater, I went to the movies last night and I haven't been in like maybe a year or so. It's been a while since I've
Yeah.
been to the movies. And Space Jam came on. And, but this, instead of having Michael Jordan, now it has LeBron James. And he
Oh,
said this,
really?
yeah, and he said
I
this.
didn't know LeBron did that. Oh,
Yeah, he's actually, when he first started, I was like, oh, this guy actually has some acting talent. Like he did a commercial where he played different roles, kind of like Eddie Murphy's Clumps, Meet the Clumps or whatever. But, I was surprised, back then. But now with Space Jam, I mean, first of all, it's a notoriously kind of like campy movie, you know what I mean, that
yeah,
had Jordan in it before. But
yeah. But it was a big hit back then, so they decided to do it again.
sure, yeah, and I understand the franchising of it, but he said a joke like, made a joke about being the same size. He's like, "Oh, I'm shorter than Kevin Hart," and it was like you could feel the vacuum in the room, just like, ugh, like that didn't land. I don't know if it was just me, my personal feeling, but I didn't hear anybody laugh. I didn't hear anybody like, I didn't, again, I don't want to tank the movie or anything, like, people will see it, I think, but I just,
Wait a minute, that was in the trailer. They did that.
yeah, that was in the trailer.
So
So
why
maybe
would they
there.
show something that doesn't work in the thing they're using to advertise the movie?
Well, I don't know. It's like who's the audience for that? Maybe it works for kids, or maybe maybe some people find his delivery funny, but it's maybe that was his best take. I don't know. You know what I mean?
But
It
you know
could.
what? That's kind. You know what? I mean, just talking about theory, that's a joke that should not work for a
Yeah.
couple of reasons. One, he's a tall, strong,
Well, he got
good-looking
squashed
man.
down. You know what I mean? That was the thing, and like he got. It was he because it's kind of
I see.
cartoonish. You know what I
Okay,
mean? And
now
so
I
he goes,
get it.
"Oh,
Now I
now
understand.
I'm shorter than Kevin Hart." You know what I mean? But
Oh, but still, it's taking a shot. This is what you can't do. You don't
yeah.
take shots at other people who have disabilities or uh, problems. So
Hmm.
Kevin always can make fun of he's too short,
Right.
but you can't make fun that Kevin's too short.
Yeah.
So
And it's
that was the
also because he
problem.
was like, now I'm shorter than Kevin Hart, which is like, now you got to start doing the math. And you're like, oh, well, how tall is Kevin Hart and how tall is this character? It would have been,
Yeah.
maybe if he just said, like, oh, now I'm Kevin Hart, like that might have been funnier or something. And people would have
I
implied
still
that he
don't
was
think
short.
so. I don't think you want to see somebody make fun of Kevin Hart being short, and that's
Yeah.
what that joke does.
Yeah. Because
It
he is
makes
like
fun of.
6'7" or
It's
whatever it
using
is.
Kevin Hart as your example of a short, funny-looking guy,
Yeah.
which is not a good thing to do
Yeah.
unless you're Kevin Hart.
Now, if it was Shaq saying I use Kevin Hart as a toothpick, that would be funny because then Shaq's pointing out how big he is, you know what I mean, and
Yeah,
also how small Kevin is, but in relation to how big he is, so that would be like
yeah,
a
but
little
it's
bit
more
funnier.
about how big he. Yeah, yeah, in the relationship that would be different. Yeah, see, but we're being analytical now about comedy, which is the thing I'm saying you can't do. You can
Yeah,
only do it for the intellectual
yeah, like
discovery. I always use this analogy that it, like in biology class when they made me dissect a frog, I dissected a frog, which was very difficult for me. We then when we looked at it, it was all done. My instinct was like I like to fix things. I wanted to put it all together again, but you could put it all together, but it would never be alive again. And it's kind of
yeah,
like that with jokes.
hmm
Once you dissect them and pull them apart and look at all the little pieces and this worked because that worked, and then put it back together, it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's definitely more difficult, but I think like, in the Seinfeld, because he's a joke person, you know what I mean? He's always like that. And it's very fascinating to watch comedians talk about like this joke didn't land because of that word usage, like because they really get into the weeds with it, you know what I
Yeah, I
mean?
know.
And
And
then
they're
they
probably right about it,
yeah.
but maybe not. Sometimes the intellectual that says the intellectual pursuit that says this would be funnier if that word had been different, and then
Hmm.
they try it with that word and it still doesn't work. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Is that because they can't really, they can maybe take a pretty good, they can have maybe improve their odds of maybe that may be working, but they can't guarantee just because it makes sense intellectually that it's going to work.
Yeah. I
That
mean,
one,
it's like
change.
using like when like speaking of words, like using like cuh sounds words. Cuh sounding words usually tend to be funnier sounding.
Yeah, they are for
Yeah.
some reason. I'm not sure why that is. Not sure why that is. They're
I'm not
usually
sure
because they're
either.
more powerful. I think it's because they're more powerful because you don't use them very often. When we do use them, we use them in kind of extreme situations.
Yeah.
So they're kind of more powerful. They're stronger words. I think
Yeah.
that's why. I
Like
think that's
calling
why they
someone
work.
pumpkin or as opposed to like sweetie. Sweetie sounds like a totally different. It also, and this is the thing when it comes to writing, it's character based. So it's really about tone, inflection, and where that perspective of that character, because you can have a non-funny, supposed non-funny word said by a character that says it in such a way attached to some kind of context, and it could be the most
Yeah.
funny thing, So that's
There's an old school thought that the letter K is funny.
yeah.
Have you ever heard that?
Yeah.
So that's why somebody say,
It's really odd looking.
this is common sense. Somebody say fuck is funnier than screw
Mhm.
because it has a K sound in it.
Mhm.
I don't believe that. I think the reason it's funnier is because it's a more crass word, and consequently it has more impact because it's a stronger word. It's not a
Mhm.
strong. I'm not saying whether it's a good or bad word. It's a stronger word.
You mean
Uh,
phonetically, or you mean like just from the
Not
context?
phonetically, just from the context, because
Mhm.
you're not allowed to use it very often in like polite conversation and
Right.
whatever. So
Mhm.
when you do say it, it's stronger than saying, screw is a euphemism.
Mhm.
Making love is a sweeter version.
Mhm.
I don't think it's the K sound in that case. I think it's the idea that it's a word we don't use that much, and so it's stronger when you do use it.
Mhm.
And we
But
don't use it
sometimes,
much just because our society says not to. There's nothing really intrinsically wrong with that word. I mean, there's
right?
nothing. It's just a word, and we know what it means. It's no better than saying copulate,
Yeah.
and that has a K in it. A K
But
sound. Copulate.
you've probably come across this. I've come across this reading other people's work because they use curse words like it's their first opportunity to ever use curse words for a character. And it doesn't often ring very well. It's not like I actually, even though I cuss a lot when I'm speaking, I rarely use cuss words unless it's deliberate, but it has to have like a deliberate perspective or that there's some point to it, you know what I mean? But sometimes when I read like newer writers' work, they use a lot of cuss words and they think it gives it like a certain kind of authority. And it often sounds to me like, you ever hear little kids use curse words and they always use it in the wrong, like the wrong
No, I
way?
never heard that.
Yeah, I
No.
think that's kind of funny. But yeah, I don't know. There's something about, I don't want to call it amateurs, just newer writing to where when they're using curse words, I almost feel like they're like, well, now I'm in, like in college now and I can say what I want. You know what I mean? I'm not as, and it just doesn't
Mm.
sound like the character would say that or, you
Huh.
know, I just think that's very fast. That's why I
I,
was asking you earlier about curse words. I actually rarely use them when I'm writing.
yeah.
But I curse a
No, I
lot when
try.
I
I
write.
try not to use them because uh, when I do use them, I want them to be strong.
Yeah.
I want them to really have impact.
Yeah.
So, like you said, if somebody's using it as an adjective, an adverb, an expletive, a noun, I've seen it used.
Yeah.
You've seen some of these words used every particular way, and yeah, it dulls it after a while. So
Hmm.
I use it in my writing, but only when it will really punch something, to give an extra punch. Otherwise, so I'm selective about my use of it too, and I have seen it. I have seen that, and violence also, and also mean-spirited stuff get overused by students because they think it makes them contemporary.
Mm-hmm.
Where the stuff I used to write, like Taxi and Cheers, they say is old school, and everybody speaks so nice to each other, and all the characters are so witty and sharp. I want to write a scene where nobody's witty and sharp, and I go,
Mm-hmm.
no, that seems boring. Somebody's
Yeah.
pouring somebody coffee, spills some on his lap, and says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and the guy says, "Ah,
Oh,
it's
it's
all right."
warm. Very
Yeah.
warm. Yeah.
So that's the scene, but or they come in saying, "Oh, what a fucking terrible day I had." Everything was just shit and crap, and somebody's pour me a fucking cup of coffee, and unless that's the character, everybody's reacting to this guy over speaking the profanities. Uh, I don't get that purpose. What's the purpose? I think you're right. I think they do it because I think it makes them think. They'd be more contemporary, more edgy. So.
Unless that guy's like a florist or whatever, like one of those people that like then it's like depends on the setting, you know what I mean? If
Oh,
you
sure.
juxtapose it from the setting or something, then
Yes,
it can
if
kind
it's
of
a
work.
part of the character's attitude, yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. If you went to talk to a florist about,
What did I say? Flowers?
yeah, you said florist, but if you go to speak to a florist and about a funeral arrangement, you
Yeah.
don't want him to be talking with profanities about, oh, this will fucking kill him at the
Yeah.
funeral.
Yeah.
You go,
Yeah.
I don't think so. So, but that
Sometimes
would be
also,
funny. That would be
yeah.
funny because it's so incongruous. Incongruity is another joke
Yeah.
because when I was thinking all the things that could be jokes, because that is a surprise. See, they almost always come back to surprise.
Sure.
Incongruity is one of the forms of comedy. Two things that don't seem to belong together can often make you laugh.
Hmm.
But part of that is the surprise that you put those two things together. So,
Or using non like the incorrect setting up like you're gonna say a cuss word, but it's actually a non sequitur word, like oh fudge, or like you know what I mean, or
yeah,
holy shnikes or something like that.
yeah,
You
sometimes
know.
that's funny. Yeah,
You know.
yeah. They did a run of that it was a running bit on The Good Place.
Hmm.
And it was funny
Yeah,
because
because they
you
can't curse.
couldn't,
Because yeah,
yeah. And so she would, but everything she said came out as one of those euphemisms. And
yeah,
then they were very funny because you knew what she was trying to say, and
yeah.
she was saying all these little sweet euphemisms. So
I actually have a theory about censorship where when they bleep stuff, I feel like by them censoring and bleeping stuff, it actually impresses the word. It makes a bigger impression in your mind because your mind fills in the blank. So now you're saying the curse word in your mind, and it's like now you know what that curse word was, and it's like
yeah,
now it's a bigger thing than if they had just said it. You might not have paid that much attention to it.
yeah. I Yeah, I think that people do use they write bleeps in,
Yeah,
their script sometimes instead of the word.
yeah.
And the network lets you do a little bit of that, but not a lot. So they know the same thing you're just saying, that everybody in their mind they hear the word,
Hmm.
they don't hear the beep or the dead space. So
Yeah.
it's tricky. I wonder about these people who are censors, what they.
Yeah, that's what we should do is we should get a censor on the show. That'd be very interesting actually. That might be
Yeah, interview them. How do you censor things? What are you looking for? What?
yeah, like
Yeah.
who hurt you, that kind of thing. Figure out what happened back in their past.
But some of them, some people fall into jobs inadvertently. I mean, if you got a job, you could do a job as a censor because you know what has to be censored. It's not a job you'd want to do.
Yeah.
It's not a job I'd want to do. But I know I could do it because I know what words they don't want to hear and what languages. And like as I said, the word bitch um, is really a take on a female dog. So when you
Hmm.
call a woman a bitch, you're basically calling her a dog.
Hmm.
Uh, but calling somebody a bitch is just stronger because we've been told you do not say that word to women.
Hmm.
And so it's a stronger word. So on TV now they're allowing it, but in limited numbers, which is, I don't understand if you allow it once or you can do it once in a scene, but you can't do it twice in the episode, but you do it a second time if it's separated by two scenes. And you
I think Amy Mann says it the best in 40-Year-Old Virgin. She has the way she says it is just so hilarious. She really gets in there and it's like really funny. I was like, oh, that's when somebody's drunk or something, like they say it a certain way or whatever. She kind of has that vibe.
Yeah.
She's pretty good at it. Yeah.
Well, I've actually heard people say like "you're my bitch" and
Yeah.
it comes off sweet.
Yeah. It's always about context, like the meaning behind it. It's not the word. People like want to put the words in prison. It's like it's not the word, it's the
Yeah.
context.
It
How
all
somebody
is, and
means it.
that's why it's very complicated for computers to put this together and then put in the human element. They can't put the human element, and when they really get real artificial intelligence, they're going to start writing scripts. It'll be so much cheaper to write a script uh, when you know all the rules and you have the artificial intelligence to create the talent, which
But I wonder,
yeah,
like, I think what makes great works of art interesting is that a human did it. I don't, if a robot can do something and it's, somewhat similar to a human being, and I find out a robot did it, I don't know that I'm going to care as much as knowing, like, oh, this person that, Jackson Pollock is a crazy alcoholic or whatever, and he also
no.
manages to drip paint on a canvas. I just find that, I don't know. Would you care? I mean, like there was a show that came out on the History Channel that was like, what Earth will be like when no humans are around. I was like, who gives a fuck? Nobody's
Mhm.
gonna be here. It's like, why do I care? It's gonna be a lot of shrubbery, I guess. I don't know. It's not that big a deal to me.
Yeah. No, I
Like the
yeah,
moon.
yeah. I don't know if if you knew is for example, like if you knew something, I guess I agree with you because I'm thinking like this is going to sound maybe unfair, but I don't enjoy Woody Allen movies anymore because I feel he's made too many wrong moves and statements and actions that when I watch his movies, I'm kind of like uncomfortable with
Hmm.
going to the Woody Allen movie, and yet maybe he's innocent of these some of the things he's been accused of, but it affects me. It does affect me. So in the same way, if I were going to see something generated by a computer, if I knew it was generated by a computer, I would not want to like it, and I probably wouldn't like it as much. But if you don't know, you might really enjoy it and then find out after the fact, oh, Woody Allen wrote that. Oh, but it was so good because
Yeah.
he's really a talented writer. But
Oh yeah. It's probably one of the most prolific writer directors of all time.
oh yeah, no doubt that he's a very talented man, and I'll never know for sure how much of the things said about him are true or not, and so it's not really fair to not go to his work based on things he has not been convicted of or proven happened. But it does affect me. So
Hmm.
I'm saying the same way it would affect me if I'm going to see a movie and all the characters are generated artificially. I don't think I would like it as much either. I know they
Hmm.
do it. It's different if you're going to something that you know is animated and it's part of the fun of it. Wow, look how great this animation is. But
Hmm.
once they get past that stage to where they're actually using animation to replace actors, I'm not going to like that.
Yeah, if
So
they have an AI written script and AI written or AI, all of it's automated, all of it's AI, the characters are AI creation. There was no human element other than pressing the on button.
yeah,
Then it's like, yeah, I mean, I would watch maybe something like that to see like, oh, how did AI do? Was it interesting? Was it entertaining?
yeah.
Because then I would be like, I would be looking at it more from the perspective of what is AI capable of. But overall, I'm going to want to see something that humans do. I mean, we're
I think for
humans.
art in particular, I think that's true. But on the other hand, the the technicians like I'm really when I go into post production, have
Hmm.
to edit a show. I can't do any of that. I'm really bad with all the really. I can use a computer for writing and some jobs I have to do with the computer. I
Right.
can't do the very complex editing, the very quick editing they do where they move things around and all. Can't do any of that. I was gonna say, so if these technicians are able to
That's
put
right.
this together, and the technician is really a highly skilled technician, and he's better than another technician, so he gets a reputation of how well he's able to manipulate all this stuff and create artificial characters and scripts and all that. I might appreciate that part. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah.
because it's still being put together by a human being. But if it gets to the point where you're just pushing a button, starting it on and off, of course, who would want to watch that unless it's
Yeah.
this is brilliant. We're saying that now, and then someday we'll see. Wow, they're writing it great. It all seems natural and real. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, like if an AI computer can show us what it's like to be human better than humans can, you know, um pontificate about being humans, then maybe I might enjoy it. I don't know. I think if I didn't know and I watched something and I found it entertaining, I'd probably be like, oh, that was cool. But if I
Yeah.
did find out, the camera set itself up and moved around and didn't have there was no people involved. I don't know. I would probably be amazed about the technology, but more because I'm fascinated by the technology doing something rather than the actual output. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's hard to say, really.
Well, let's just say we're talking about art, so art is very difficult to pin down in its place. And sometimes, as I said, I feel really bad that I don't enjoy Woody Allen movies anymore, but I don't. I
Yeah.
don't. And it's maybe not even fair to him. Maybe the guy's getting really bum rap. Somebody's gonna be real upset that I even acknowledge that maybe he
But
isn't
it's like
really,
Michael Vick.
but
When Michael Vick got busted for
the
dog
dog
fighting.
fighting, yeah.
Yeah, like it really
I
taints the way I
It
view
did. I
him.
didn't want to watch him anymore. I didn't watch him play football anemore.
He's
I
supremely
just
talented. It didn't change his talent at all, but
no.
it
And he was
changed my
always the same guy.
perception.
We just didn't know it. He was probably always that guy who liked violence so much in his game. He liked doing it with dogs. Maybe he's a very violent person in all aspects of his life, which is kind of a scary thought.
Yeah.
But we don't know any of that. All we know is he did a terrible thing with the dogs, and I couldn't enjoy his career anymore. And nobody did. And he kind of disappeared.
I mean, it was always, yeah, it was a little bit of a shock that he came back, and he actually did pretty well, but I didn't follow
But
it.
not for long, because I
Yeah.
think people felt that. People just weren't rooting for him anymore.
Yeah, and
So,
that's kind of sad too because he was such an amazing talent, and
yeah.
again, like you said, he was already doing that, and I don't even know the circumstances. That's the other thing about some of these like trial by public opinion. You don't actually, you will write. I know for myself, I can't speak for anyone else. I will sometimes write someone off with no real understanding of the case or the circumstances whatsoever. If I hear something that I don't really like, and I've tried to get over that because I feel like you know that's kind of unfair because we are supposed to have a system where it's like innocent until proven guilty, and then once you're proven guilty, then you serve your time and you make your penance to the world or whatever. But
Yeah.
in our daily culture, so much news gets broadcasted and repeated that just the fact of repeating something a lot seems to impress upon you like, oh, that must be true because I'm hearing it from Instagram and Twitter and on the news
Yeah.
and all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah,
I don't know.
we can be manipulated pretty easily too, so
Yeah,
it's hard to know. And it's hard to know. It's
yeah.
really hard to know. So, but
So
I
that's the
am
perfect place for a
influenced.
laugh track right there.
Yeah. I am influenced so heavily by people who have been convicted or have not denied it, or where it's been proven. I have trouble separating the artist from the art,
Yeah.
and just enjoying the art despite what the person may have done with their lives. I have trouble with that, and I can't help it. I go in with influenced by this guy was just convicted of murder. I don't want to really watch his comedy. It's just
Yeah, and
okay.
also, well, what do you think about Mike Tyson?
Well, it's a violent sport, so I'm not sure that I don't know. I have a problem with him because he seems to be super violent, but it's a violent sport. I don't know. He goes beyond the limits, so I'm not a big fan of his. No.
I've actually become more endeared to him because he's changed so much as a human being, and it's like you
Oh
can really,
yeah.
yeah, it's like really, like, I mean, I think he went to jail. I think it was originally rape for Robin Givens, or I don't know exactly what he went to jail for. I can't remember exactly, but obviously he went to jail for like 3 years, so it must have been pretty egregious.
Yeah.
And then, but now as a man, talk about, we talked in a couple episodes ago about redemption. Being able to redeem yourself through learning from your past mistakes. Now, when you hear him talk, it's just he's such an evolved person. It's like, wow, and it's not a
Oh
put on, you know what I mean? It's like you can tell like he started boxing again in his 50s just recently. He fought Roy Jones Jr. And one thing that he was on the Joe Rogan show, and one thing that he kept trying to get across to Joe Rogan, of course, Joe Rogan was a super fan, so he couldn't really like, I don't know why he didn't understand like what he was getting at, but he didn't really want to talk about boxing that much, which is odd because he's, you know, one of the best boxers in the world, because he says it feeds his ego, and the ego is what gets him in trouble. He's very aware that like, oh, when I was on top, it was my ego that was keeping me there, and that's what led to so much destruction in my life. And so like once he was able to, you know, he's had a lot of tragedies. I mean, he had a daughter that died, you know, he's had a lot of tragedies. He lost all his money, you know, people were betrayed him along the way. And then hearing his story, you know, and like his respect for you know, his old coach Customato, and you know, I'm not saying he's a perfect person. No, I don't think any of us are, but I'm like so much more impressed with him now than I was then, even though when I first watched him when I was younger, I was like, wow, he's a great boxer. But now as a man who's evolved, and I think that's very fascinating because, you know, we do have a cancel culture, and it's almost like you're never allowed, and I know I've brought this up before, but you're never allowed to make a mistake and then learn from your mistake. And as writers, we often use the mistake to be a catalyst for the growth of a character. And maybe that's why I'm sympathetic to people who grow genuinely without you know, maybe with or without any outside intervention, maybe with outside intervention. It's difficult to grow as a person and to admit your mistakes and to look at yourself and to evolve that way. And so when people do that, I find it very I, you know, I tend to empathize with their newer developed personality
Yeah.
more.
Well, there's something to be said for that. But in show business, most the people who we see on the screen usually are actors.
Sure.
You never know when they're acting.
Right.
When
That's
somebody
the thing
said
about
the
actors.
publicist said, "Look, you got a really bad rep now. Now you got to come out and start talking this way or doing this or
Right.
even
Yeah.
doing some charity work, some
Sure.
minor charity stuff." And I don't know who to believe,
That seems phony. Yeah.
but on that note, I got to go, or my wife's gonna
All right.
murder me and
Sounds good.
kick me all over the room and beat me with a heavy object.
All right. Yeah.
So
All right. Well, it's time to say happy birthday. I guess we could say happy birthday to Uncle Sam or your brother. You said your brother's birthday was
yeah,
today.
yeah,
So
it's his birthday. So happy birthday to everybody who has a birthday and to the country.
yeah, happy birthday. All right. Cool. Good deal.